Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. This is Grandmaster Liem from Vietnam. Today, I am going to do a masterclass on my best games in the Champions Chess Tour 2022. So I have selected 3 games in the Charity Cup and the Oslo Esports Cup. Let's go over them. Okay, so this is the first game. I have black in this game against Grandmaster Gavin Jones from the United Kingdom, from England. And I started, we started e4, e5. I was black here. This is the Italian. So everything is pretty natural here. Not going too much into opening theory. This opening has been really, really popular at the top level in the last few years, mainly because people wanted to avoid heavy theory and just get some playable positions. The thing about this opening is that it can be playable for both sides, and the type of position is normally slow and positional. So let me start from here and explain the ideas from both sides and what went wrong with white, because my opponents lost this game very quickly. So I started with this move, knight e7, which is a very typical move in this pawn structure. Why does the knight go there? It is very simple, because the knight is better placed on g6 than on c6. So that's why the knight went to e7 with the idea to go to g6. So the reason why the knight is better placed on g6 is that on g6, it is closer to white's king side. So with the black knight on g6, black can potentially play knight h5, knight f4, or maybe knight h4 at some point. And then also potentially black can play c6 and d5 and attack white center. So same thing for white in this pawn structure. In many cases, white wants to play knight d2, knight f1, knight g3, and then try to attack on the king side. My opponent here decided to play this move d4, which is nothing wrong with it. Then I continue my plan with knight g6, solidifying the e5 square. Then bishop b3 is okay. Another move is bishop d3. It is debatable where to put the bishop. Sometimes the bishop is good on this diagonal, sometimes it's good on this diagonal. So you never really know. So after bishop b3, I play with this move c6. Typical move. Knight bd2. And here I really like the plan that I came up with. I took this pawn, and then I played d5. So now white has a difficult decision to make. If he takes my pawn on d5, then I can take back with the knight, and white is left with an isolated pawn. There's still nothing wrong for white though, because white can play, for example, knight to e4, bishop to g5, and white pieces are very active. If white play like in the game, which is e5, it looks like white gained some space, but this move is very risky, because after knight h5, all black pieces are very well placed. This knight is coming to f4, this bishop puts pressure on d4, this bishop put pressure on h3, and black can open up the center very quickly with f6. Look at white's position. This bishop is now doing nothing on this diagonal. The d5 pawn is very well defended. So this position is not great for white. This is also the reason why I believe a few moves ago, instead of bishop d3, it might have made more sense for white to go with bishop d3. And the point is, let's say if I do the same plan, then you can see this bishop now is on a better diagonal. And there are some very long theory here. For example, this line g3, I believe, is a critical move. And the point of g3 is just to take away the f4 square for the knight. And yes, black can take this pawn, but then there is knight h2, and this knight is in trouble. So black has to sacrifice the knight with knight takes g3, and then bishop d4. And yes, black has 3 pawns for the piece, but it's still very complicated. The white queen is coming to h5, knight coming to f3, and I believe there are some correspondence games here. Black is fine if he knows what he's doing, but it's very, very complicated. In the game, the bishop on b3 is completely worse for white, and I believe this is already probably slightly better for black in this position. If I were white here, I would probably take ed and then play knight to e4, and then maybe knight c5 or bishop g5 or bishop e2, and just try to consolidate. But it is very easy to overestimate your position here. Usually when you're white and you have some space advantage, you would think that white is doing great here, and you could try to attack with the move e5, which is not as good as it looked. So after knight h5, my opponent went with knight f1. Very typical, very natural move. But then after knight f4 and f6, it's already very difficult for white. Now, you can see all black's pieces are perfectly placed. Black just wants to take fe and then sacrifice on h3, or maybe go knight h4. And I think this position is already very, very difficult for white. I'm not sure if there is a good way to hold the balance for white. Probably white has to play, for example, bishop c2, and then if f takes e5, maybe take this knight, forcing the black knight to recapture and then take de. But still, I believe this position only black can be better, because this bishop is very, very active here. Black can play, for example, queen e7, blockade the pawn, getting the bishop to f5, the rook to e8 or d8, and black's position is really beautiful. If white captures the bishop on b6, then this is helping black. Black open up the a file for his rook and also move a pawn toward the center. So this position is already very, very difficult for white. But what my opponent did is significantly worse. He played knight to g3, which looks like a very natural move. You bring more pieces to control the center. However, after f takes e5, d takes e5, I found a very strong move, and it's also a very natural move. It's knight to h4. As I said before, that's the whole idea why I wanted my knight on g6 and not on c6. Because this knight now suddenly jump to h4 and putting a lot of pressure on the white king side. So after this move, knight h4, black is threatening knight takes g2, knight takes f3. So white really had no choice here. He had to take the knight, and then the queen, the black queen, comes over to h4, and now black again has so many threats like bishop h3, knight takes g2, sometimes also knight takes h3. So there is no satisfactory way to defend against all those threats. So he played the move queen to d2, hoping to defend the bishop and f2. And I believe this is what Tao said, that you just need to position your pieces to the optimal squares and then tactics will come naturally. And this is a perfect example of that, because black's pieces are all perfectly placed. The two bishops, the knight, the rook. Only this rook on a8 is currently out of play, right? And look at how many pieces does white have near his king. Only a bishop and a knight. And black has already 1, 2, 3, 4, and potentially 5. So naturally, there should be a tactic here. And I found this tactic pretty quickly with bishop takes h3. So white was really in big trouble here. The point being, if white takes on f4, then rook takes f4 and f2 is under attack. Also, black is threatening queen takes g3 because of the pin. White is not going to be able to recapture. So that is not good. In the game, he took g takes h3. And here, I continue with a simple move, bishop takes e3. So now, this pawn is overloaded. It cannot capture fe. That would drop the knight on g3. My opponent took with the queen. It doesn't help if he takes with the rook. This is still totally losing for white, because black can take on h3, and then on f2, when white has to sacrifice the queen, and then queen h2 at least, followed by rook f8. And white is surely losing a lot of material here. But also I can also just continue with a very simple queen takes h3, threatening queen g2 check, mate. So white has to defend that with f3, and that drops the knight. So this is pretty easy to calculate, and my opponent understandably took with the queen. And now I continue with knight takes h3 and rook takes f2, winning the queen, and then his king is still in danger. I went with queen h2, and then finally bringing the rook to the attack. And this last move is not the only way to win, but it's a pretty way to win. So I was quite happy about that. So right now there's no good check, but this simple move, g5, really kills white, because I bring another pawn to the attack and create two very strong threats. One is queen h4 checkmate, and the other one is rook f4 check, forcing king g5, and then queen takes g3. So after g5, my opponent resigned. This was a very smooth win for me. And I wanted to show this game so you guys can see what can really go wrong if white misevaluate his position here, misjudge his position, and just some very natural looking move can bring white into big trouble here. Move like knight f1, bishop e3, knight g3, which usually a very natural move in the Italian, but here it's already very, very bad for white. And this is a very typical plan for black. Knight e7, knight g6, c6, and d5, and knight h5. Very typical plan, especially if, well, if black wants to do that plan, he should refrain from playing the move h6. I see in a few cases where black tries to play, for example, let me just make a few moves for you guys to see. For example, this type of position is not as good anymore. First of all, because black lost the tempo on this move h6. And this is really, really bad because now let's say white make a move and bishop c2. Then black will never have this move f6 again because the knight on g6 is hanging. And if he goes like knight f4, white can go knight g3, and again f6 is not working because of e6. And because of this hanging knight on g6, black cannot take the pawn on e6. So this is very important for black. If he wants to play with this plan, that black should not play f6 and should go knight e7 right away, so that the knight on g6 is defended in the future, and also to save the tempo on this maneuver. So what we can take away from this game is that the in the Italian, this plan knight e7, knight g6 is very typical, followed by c6 and d5. And white should probably find a more aggressive way to challenge black's setup. For example, probably you don't really need that move h3. You can maybe go a4 first, bishop e3, and try to challenge black center. Bishop g5 is also a move here, but I'm not going to analyze the opening variations too deeply here. Just a general idea for you guys in the middle game. So I'm pretty happy about this game, the way I found the plans here. I think it was an instructive way for black to play. Obviously, white's play leave a lot to be desired, but this is a model game of how black wants to play in this position. So I'm going to go to the next game. Give me a second. Okay, so this is a game between me and Grandmaster Duda in the Charity Cup preliminaries. This is round 9 of the tournament and the first game of day 3. So just to give you guys, just to give a context of what was happening in that tournament, after the first 2 days, I was leading with 20 points, while my opponent, Duda, shared the second place with Magnus Carlsen on 16 points. So I was sure that my opponent wanted to fight and wanted to win this game, and I was ready for this fight. So we started with this opening. This is the semi-slav, and this is one of Duda's main openings, so I was not surprised. So I chose this VC2 classical line against the semi-slav. This line used to be more popular back in maybe 10 years ago, but for some reason people kind of stopped playing it nowadays. Not sure why. I believe this is still one of the main challenges for black in this opening. So black really needs to know a lot here. There are many ways to play here, bishop e3, bishop e2, and so on. So again, this is a very positional battle. In this middle game, there are so many interesting ideas for both sides. So yes, temporarily, white has more control of the center, but in the long run, black, if he can play c5 or e5, he will be able to free his position. So I decided to go for this line e4, threatening e5. So black has to respond with e5. Okay, so this is a relatively older line. I went for this line mainly just to surprise my opponent, hoping that he would not remember the line so well, or at least he has to take some time to recall the line, which could give me some time advantage. And it worked perfectly. So he played the best move, but it did cost him some time. So the point of knight d4 is simply to avoid the trade of the knight. And then sometimes white wants to go knight f5, and also potentially black has to watch out for f4 and e5. Not right away, because f4 black has bishop c5, but potentially knight f5 is something that black has to, sorry, f4 and e5 is that something black has to watch out for. So black played this move knight eg4, attacking the pawn on h2, and then I play g3. So back in the days, sometimes black played this move bishop takes g3, and it may look like black wins a pawn after h takes g3, queen takes d4, but actually this position is considered to be very good for white, because with this key move, white gets to trade the queens. Queen to d1, exchanging the queens here, offering the exchange of the queens and also attacking g4. So black really does not have any way to avoid the trade of the queens. Black has to take. And then after rook d1, even though it's queens off, is middle game, end game, and black is up a pawn, white is actually having the advantage here, mainly because of the bishop pair and the control of the center. So the fact that white doesn't have the edge pawn doesn't matter too much here. White is going to continue with f3, bishop e3 or bishop f4, and then play on the queen side. Control this c5 square with rook c1. Potentially, sometimes white can also go knight b1, knight d2, knight b3, knight c5. And black bishop here is really misplaced, and it's very hard to play for black here. So this is the reason people stopped playing this bishop takes g3 move, and this is now considered very comfortable for white if black takes on g3. So after g3, opponent went for bishop c5, which is the best move, attacking my knight here on d4. So the knight has to go. It jumps to f5, which is the idea of knight d4. Rook e8, very typical moves, putting pressure on e4 and creating some threats like b4, getting my knight away and attacking e4. So I decided to take this knight, alleviate the pressure on e4, and keep developing my bishop to f4, trying to get the rook to d1, and so on, to control d6. So there are dozens of games that have been played up to this point. Queen b6, very typical move here. So here I make a novelty, but actually it was not a good novelty. I mix up the lines that I prepare, and I play the move a4, which is really not a good one. I should have played probably queen e2, attacking the knight on g4, forcing the knight to go back. For example, if the knight goes back to f6, then I can try e5, harassing the knight again. Black is still fine, but he has to know this move, bishop f8, which is not an easy move to make. Why bishop f8? Because white is actually threatening knight takes g7. If black makes any other move, for example, rook a d8, then knight takes g7 is already winning for white. King g7, ef, and the black king is in big trouble. And the knight cannot really go anywhere because, let's say, knight e5 runs into queen g4, and black is having trouble again with his king side. For example, here knight e4 is pretty strong. Knight h6 was also pretty good. But if black can play this move, bishop f8, is absolutely fine here. And the points of bishop f8, first of all, is to defend g7. Secondly, is to prepare for c5 and create counterplay on this long diagonal. So it is not easy to play here for both sides, but black is okay with this long sequence of move. ef, queen takes f6, and then the knight is suddenly in trouble. The knight cannot really go back to h4 because of b4, and this knight is now in trouble. Knight a4 runs into queen c6, and if knight d1, then again black can attack with queen c6 and then bishop a6, and black gets a lot of activity here. So that's why in that position, white should not go back to h4, but white should play queen takes b5. But here black is okay. Black can play at least bishop a6, and then black will get back the knight. For example, just an example line. Black will get the exchange. White is probably still okay, but definitely not better. For example, here, knight f4, and so on. Most likely, we will get to an endgame where white is down exchange, but very safe, because it's going to be 3 against 2 on the king side with bishop against rook or knight against rook. So that's very safe. So anyway, let's go back to that moment when I play a4. So the reason why I play a4 is that somehow I thought that if black play b4, my original intention is to play a5 here. And at first I thought, okay, after a5, the queen has to go somewhere, for example here, and then I can go knight a4, and this is much better for white because I get my knight to c5. What I miscalculated is that black has an intermediate move with bishop takes f2. And obviously I cannot take on f2. Black will exchange everything on f2 and take my knight on c3. So after king g2, black has this move queen to c5. And then my knight is pinned. It cannot go anywhere. And I spent some time calculating moves like this, but eventually I decided this is This is fine for black. I can get this bishop, but then the other bishop becomes extremely active, and this is very, very risky for white. The bishop is attacking here, and I feel very uncomfortable here. So I decided to not go for this line, but then actually that should still be my preference. That should still be the best move for white. But as they say, mistakes usually come in pairs. Once you make a mistake, you tend not to admit that was a mistake, and you try to deviate, or you got scared, or you play some bad move after that. And that's what happened to me. After I played the bad move a4, I continue with knight d1, which I thought, okay, if I can defend f2, I might have a good chance here. But the thing is, after knight d1, black had a very simple move, bishop f8. And this simple retreat is very strong, but it's very easy to overlook. What's the idea of bishop f8, you may ask? The idea is very simple. Black clears the way for the pawn to advance and free up this bishop, creates pressure on e4. And now with the bishop pair, black is really better here. Also, at some point, black can chase the white knight away with g6. So this position is strategically lost for white, because there is no satisfactory way for white to get his pieces out. For example, knight d3, black can simply take on e3, and then c5. And yes, white can play f3, but then black has this bishop c8 move, putting pressure on the knight, and if the knight retreats, then black can try to play for c4 like this. If white played, for example, knight to d6, this move could run into bishop takes, and then again c5. Now, bishop c5, and the queen can go to either f6 or c6. Both are very, very strong. For example, queen c6, attacking e4, and also creating the threat of rook c8, attacking the bishop. With f3, again, black can go rook c8 or knight e5. Both are very strong. For example, here, and then black can. Here, black has a number of moves. For example, bishop a6 is quite strong. If rook e1, black has knight e5, attacking f3 and d3. And if fg, take, and then rook e5. Wins back the bishop, and white is down. White is down is strange, I think. Bishop d4 runs into check, queen e2, another check, and black picks up this rook. And this is lost for white. So this move, bishop f8, was missed by me and probably my opponent as well. So this is also another tip for you guys, is that usually people tend to overlook those retreat moves, those backward moves, because everyone wants to go forward, want to attack, but sometimes those backward moves are very strong because you create space for your other pieces. Yes, if you go queen takes c5, Yes, black has queen takes c5 here, bishop c5, and then this knight e5 is again very strong. Even without the queens, this is very unpleasant for white. This diagonal is so weak. Black has first like knight f3, followed by bishop e4. And if f3, black can win the exchange with bishop a6. And rook f2 runs into knight d3. So black is winning at least an exchange here. Okay, so let's go back to that moment. After 91, my opponent really missed a golden opportunity to play bishop f8. He played this move, bishop a6, which is also a natural move, but here it was not that strong because yes, he was attacking f1, but I had another intermediate move with a5, forcing the queen to the b5 square, and then I have knight e3. So I use the fact that temporarily black cannot capture on f1. This rook is defending the rook on f1. So after knight e3, I managed to trade off his dangerous knight on g4. So he took and took with a bishop. Now he went back to f8, which was a little bit too late. He could have also taken on e3 and play a move like queen e5. And black is definitely not worse here. But okay, I was already quite happy with my position here. At least I managed to trade off two pairs of minor pieces. And okay, even though he's up a pawn here, I was pretty confident that I might be able to get back the pawn. And this bishop is not that dangerous anymore. My knight on e3 is doing a pretty good job of defending my king side. So that's why he went back to f8. He wanted to keep more pieces on the board. And then I continue with rook fd1, which is a very natural move, centralizing my rook. Then he played this rook ad8. This move was the first step in a wrong direction for black. So he should have followed up with the logical c5. I'm sure that's the reason why he played bishop f8. But for some reason, he changed his mind at the last minute and played this move c5. Sorry, this move rook ad8 instead of c5. So, for example, if knight d6 here, black can take and play c4, and black pawn looks a little bit more dangerous than white's pawn. Position remains around equal, but in the game, after rook ad8, it was better for white actually, because I had rook takes d8 and then knight d4, attacking the queen and the pawn on c6. Probably he overestimated his chances here. Yes, my king side does look weak, but he lost his coordination after this move. It was necessary for black to play this move queen to, and the point is knight c6. Black has rook c8, pinning the knight and trading the queens. Even though black is down pawn, he has the bishop pair, so he should have enough compensation here for the pawn. In the game, he played the move queen to h5, and then after queen takes c6, black was in big trouble already. If he was in time to get the bishop here, then yes, my king might be in trouble, but his bishop was so far away from the long diagonal, so I had time to attack his rook and his bishop. Queen c7 was a very natural move attacking the rook, forcing him to go to e8, and then I had time to defend my pawn with f3. This is already winning for white because black is not only down a pawn, his pieces are also very weak. The h7 pawn is very weak. If I manage to capture that pawn, my a pawn will be very dangerous. Yes, he probably practically it could have been a better move to take on d4, sacrificing the exchange and trying to create counterplay like this. But the thing is, I always have f3 to defend against the long diagonal attack. For example, after queen f4, bishop c6, I can go probably rook c1, and if queen d5, I just go f3. And any type of endgame is probably lost for black. Queen d5 instead of f3? No, that doesn't work. Did you mean queen e5 here? No, queen e5 here runs into queen f3. Queen e5 here is also not good, runs into queen f3. So queen f4 is absolutely necessary to defend against queen f3. Yeah, but this is pretty good for white. Anytime queen d5, white has f3, and that's all. So after rook e8, f3, if I just move queen h3, still black doesn't have any counterplay, any real attack here, and I play this move knight f5 and queen d7. Queen d7 is a very nice move because not only that white is attacking the e8 rook, white also creates discover threats with 97 or knight h6, winning the black queen on h3. So that's why I had to play this move, rook e6, to temporarily close this diagonal. And here I play queen c8. Again, the point of this move is to create the threat of knight e7 again. So black doesn't have time for bishop takes f3. So I play h5. Here there are many ways to win. Knight d4 is also very good. But I went for the more direct move, bishop c5, attacking the bishop on f8. And he doesn't give up. He still keeps fighting with rook g6, trying to, first of all, defend g7, of course, but also trying to create some threats on my king side. So here I decided to go for the simplest solution, as I do not want to allow any complication. The engine actually said that here I can boldly go for rook e1, like this, rook e1. But I feel like I don't really need to allow this bishop f3 or h3, and I don't want to expose my king like this. So I decided to go for the simple bishop f2 and bishop g3, and the whole point of my play is to sacrifice the queen here on g6, and then knight h4 and knight f3. Yes, I understood it was gonna take more time to win this in game, but this is very safe. This is the safest it can get for white. I have 3 pieces against the queen, and this is a very significant material advantage that I was confident I could convert in time trouble because all my pieces defend each other and I could target those pawns. So yeah, I kept playing for a while, but my only weakness is the A pawn, which I was happy to give it up and just consolidate and win the other pawn. So my plan here was very simple, just winning the A pawn so he cannot create any counterplay, any pass pawn, and then I will win the G pawn, and then I will push my H pawn and promote it. The thing is, my king is very well covered by my minor pieces, and I just have to be careful with my rook. That's all. So yeah, you guys can see here that I play some slow move, make sure no accident can happen here. Eventually, I won this G pawn. Everything defended. Everything is well defended, and I just keep pushing my my pawn to promote. It took a little bit more time than I expected, but the position never really changed. And this last position is very beautiful, I think, because look at this. Everything is defended. My king defend my bishop and my knight and my pawn. My bishop defend this pawn on b2 and control the promotion square. The rook is defended by the knight and it covers the 6th rank. He could have given, yeah, he did give a check here, but then he ran out of check and all my pieces still protect each other. And my next move is just going to be h8. So he resigned here. So this was a very fighting game and I was happy with the way I play. Probably not really so much in the opening, but once he let me off the hook with this a5 and then the e3, I managed to consolidate myself in the middle game and outplay him from there. So in general, not a game without mistakes, but I think it was a very, very fascinating game, very fighting game against one of the strongest players in the world. So let's see one more game I have here, and this game is also very special to me. This is my game in the Oslo Esports Cup in Norway last month. And this is the last game of the match against the world champion Magnus Carlsen. So after 3 games, we were tied with 1.5. And this last game was critical. I had the white pieces and Magnus went for a very, very fascinating line. He obviously wanted to fight for the win from the start. So that's why he took a very, very risky approach. He went for the binary structure. This structure usually is considered to be good for white. However, it is not that simple to play over the ball. So the thing is, white has to attack here. You cannot play passively. You have to attack and show that you want to win. You can gain the advantage. You have to prove that. Otherwise, if black is given enough time, it will generate some counterplay in the center or the king side, and this is not that easy to play for white. So this move, knight h5, is very interesting. Usually people castle here. However, if black plays passively with, for example, castle rook e8, then white can play move like bishop f4, and yes, potentially white will play for e5, or maybe putting pressure on the weak pawn on d6. And black's main issue is that he does not have serious counterplay here. d5 almost never works. D6 pawn is weak. Knight e5 is usually a positional mistake because of this, and bishop e3. And the pawn on c5 is very weak. And white will follow up with a5 and knight a4 and so on. So that's why Magnus decided to play this knight h5. It is a very provocative move. First of all, black stops this bishop f4, and he also creates the threat of knight e5, exchanging a pair of knights, which is usually helpful for black in the Benoni structure to exchange a pair of knights. And also this move provokes white to play g4, which I did in the game, but that was a very risky move for white as well, because once white plays g4, white's king side is seriously weakened. And because black has not castled yet, black can potentially play h5 and attack the white's pawn on g4. So I actually, after the game, I checked this line a little bit, and my conclusion is white should not play g4 here, but white should play maybe bishop g5, harassing this queen. And the point is white wants to provoke black to play f6 or bishop f6. For example, if black play f6, then white simply retreat the bishop to e3, and now this g4 is a big threat. If black plays knight e5, white can again go g4, and this knight is lost. So black has to probably play this move bishop f6, and then white can play bishop h6, not allowing black to castle. So if black wants to castle, he would have to try to exchange the bishop with bishop g7. But usually this is good for white to exchange the bishops this way, and then just play for castle, and queen d2, and so on. And white has several plans to choose from here. One is to play on the king side with maybe knight h2, f4, also with h6, knight g5 sometimes. And another plan is to play on the queen side with rook a b1 and b4. Both plans are really promising for white here. So if black plays knight e5 here, white can simply retreat with bishop e2, and this exchange will expose the knight on h5. The knight may have to go back to g7, and then white can play simply queen d2 and castle. And black doesn't really have any counterplay here. The knight is misplaced on g7, and white has a very comfortable position. So this is probably the safest way to play for white. But in the game, I overestimated my chances with g4. This was actually not so good, because after the black knight retreats to f6, well, this line is definitely risky for black. I wouldn't say necessarily bad for black, but yeah, it is risky, and I don't expect Magnus to play it in classical. But the funny thing is he actually played this same opening again in the same tournament in a later round against Anish Giri, and he actually won that game very nicely. Anish did not go for this line, I don't know why, but Anish actually got a good advantage also. However, Magnus managed to win, so it just goes to show this line is not that easy to play. Anyway, what is interesting is a few moves later, so h5 is logical. He wanted to close the king side before a castle. And here the position is actually very complicated here. And to be honest, I did not like my position at all during the game. Why? Because I understood that black can play knight e5 and this pawn on g5 may be in trouble. In some cases, black can also play f6 and try to open up the f file. So it's very, very messy here. And I did not see a clear way to proceed. Also, let me just go back to this point a little bit and show you guys this line e5. During the game, I spent quite a bit of time to try to make this work. And at first, it looks really interesting and really promising. But the point is, black can simply capture on e5 this way. And let's say I go rook e1. Black can simply play castle. 97 is also okay, but let's say castle. And this is not that easy. Queen d7 or queen d6 here. And this position is really, really messy. And I have no idea who is better here. My king side is very exposed. And if I made a mistake, I would have lost this game very quickly. So I decided not to go for those complications and just close the center, close the king side, and keep a good control of the center. But the thing is, after this move, things got messy real quick. Because now, black wants to open up the f file for his rook and his queen. And I cannot take gf, obviously, because of queen takes, and my pieces are in big trouble. So I had to do something here. And usually, this kind of move are not too difficult to find when you are, basically here I don't have too many choices. I have to go for an attack. Otherwise, I would just lose this game. So I made this move, knight h4, pretty quickly. And the point is, of course, to try to attack g6. So the critical variation I calculated during the game is this f takes g5, knight takes the pawn, attacking the queen and the rook. But black has this move, queen f7. And here I have to fight this only move, e5. Cannot go back because I would lose the piece. So I would have to fight this move, knight takes, bishop take here, bishop take, knight take. And okay, actually f4 is better. Yeah, actually bishop f5, bishop e5, I have f4, bishop f4, and then king h1. And I have very good attack here, the queen coming to h5, and this is really messy. So I guess that's why Magnus did not want to go for this line. It's really hard to say who's better here. So that's why in the game he decided to go with the relatively safer move, knight e5. And then I took here, which is only move he took. And here's the critical moment during the game. I took this pawn, he took f2, I went king g3. So tell me what would you guys play here for black? You guys can type in the comments and let me know what you would do here for black. Yes, queen f7 is the most natural move, but you have to see what to do after queen takes h5. Queen f7 is what Magnus play. Queen h5. knight f8 at first sight, it looks good, but the problem with knight f8 is that white has this beautiful move, knight e7, and you have to take my knight, then I take your rook here, and you are down exchange, and also 2 pawns. Actually 1 pawn, but yeah, that's a big disadvantage here. So knight f8 doesn't work. What else can you do here? This is a very beautiful move, and both Magnus and I miss this move during the game. So white is actually threatening just rook af1, and black has to do something quick. Otherwise, yeah, he doesn't have time for a move like bishop e7, because after rook af1, black is just lost. But black has a very strong move here, that is knight takes g5. The point is obviously white cannot take queen g5, because after queen f3, white is getting checkmated on h3. And if rook f1, then black has knight takes h3. And suddenly black is winning here. Black managed to defend the rook on f2. So knight g5, and black is safe. White has to play knight e7, and probably black has to take this. King f2, knight h3, king e3, knight g1, and so on. So black is okay here. Black is surviving. Maybe in the long term, black may even have some chances with the bishop here. But this line is really hard to see, especially when both sides were in time trouble. So Magnus played this move, rook f4, but this is a bad move because it looks interesting, because right now white cannot take the pawn on f4, and black is threatening knight f8 to win the knight on g6. But the thing is, white can just retreat with bishop e2, and the point of bishop e2 is to defend the queen on h5. So after knight f8, I can take on f4, and that's what happened. I won the exchange, and I was still up a pawn, so this is totally winning for white. However, the conversion was not the best. For example, here I could have taken the pawn like this, and this should be winning for white. Rook a1 is coming back, it's coming next, and black doesn't have any compensation. But I did not play that move, and I allow him a lot of compensation. And the position went back and forth for a while. Here, I was sure I was better, but it was still very messy, and I did not see a clear way to improve my position, because you can see my queen is stuck here, my rook cannot move, my king cannot move, my knight cannot move at the moment because b2 would be hanging. So I decided to move my rook and try to attack this pawn with rook c2. And here, after queen e6 check, black could have actually made a draw with the move king to h8. And the point is, if I go rook c2, let's say f3, no, sorry, it's not f3, it's c3, bc, b3, and only now f3. And for example, now f2, and then he can have this move, rook f4, which is very annoying because the threat is queen takes h4, and if I give check, then he just goes back to f8, and I have nothing better down retreating to e6. And this is one way black can make a draw here. It's very, very messy here. Queen c4 doesn't work because black has queen d7, and suddenly I'm in trouble here with those knight f4 coming. So there were several opportunities like that, and he could have made a draw. Also, for example, here, apparently somewhere here. Yeah, I think queen h8 was the draw. Not so sure if I remember correctly, but there was a draw somewhere. Yeah, I think there was queen h8 like this, and rook b3, rook f7, and then rook e7, rook f7 was a draw here, because my queen really doesn't have anywhere to go. So there was some ideas like that to make a draw, but it was difficult to see, and he made this mistake with king h8. After that, there was no way back. Yeah, so I won this pawn on b6, and then after rook b8, Magnus resigned. So obviously, this game is very, very complicated with a lot of mistakes from both sides. Understandable for a rapid game, but I think from a fighting perspective, this was one of my best games in the tournament, and I was pretty happy about it. So in general, I feel that playing those type of complicated, crazy games was very, very difficult for both sides, of course, because the likelihood of someone making a mistake increased significantly. But I do it from time to time. It's fun, and I would suggest you guys to also try to play those fighting games, because it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of calculation. The player who calculates better will usually win. I'm not claiming that I'm better than Magnus. In general, this is just a game, and anything can happen. But really, I enjoy fighting. Enjoy playing such a fighting game, and always nice to beat Magnus, of course. So anyway, thank you all for participating in my masterclass today. Hope to see you guys again the next time.
It's time to take control of your journey towards chess mastery. Magnus Carlsen introduces Chessible, the definitive solution for studying chess. Move Trainer uses the science of spaced repetition to identify your strengths and eliminate your weaknesses. There's no need to set up a board, remember which page you're on, or keep track of all the moves you miss. Move Trainer empowers you to go from the opening to the end game with confidence. It's a seamless, effective, and fun way to study chess. Choose from one of the largest online chess libraries in the world, with hundreds of titles ranging from classic books through to our exclusive Chessible courses, including over 100 free courses. Get expert insights from International Master John Bartholomew, Grandmaster Sam Shankland, International Master Krzysztof Sulecki, Grandmaster Simon Williams, World Champion Magnus Carlsen, and hundreds of other instructors. Get started now and join our growing community of over 100,000 chess enthusiasts at chessible.com. Chessible. Take control of your journey towards chess. Chessible, the definitive solution for studying chess. Choose from one of the largest online chess libraries in the world, with hundreds of titles ranging from classic books through to our exclusive Chessible courses.